Well, hello, one and all. Thank you for joining me. Today, we're going to talk about doppelgangers for today's Monster Monday. Welcome to RPGs with DBJ. And yeah, Monster Mondays, just an opportunity to talk about something as small and specific as the doppelganger, or even as large and broad as creating monsters or anything in between. But today we're going to talk about doppelgangers and how they fit in the world, how they can fit into your world, some tips and tricks for using them. Hell, even why do they even exist in the first place? The classic doppelganger is a formless humanoid, often depicted as gray, maybe black, pupilless eyes, and has the ability to take on the form of creatures, uh, uh, usually relatively similar to its size, usually no more than half again taller or shorter, and almost like an invasion of the body snatchers kind of deal where it can kill a victim and take on its shape. Now, um, depending on the method that you use doppelganger, some are only limited to taking on the form of a victim that they've killed and then taking on their shape, almost like a skinwalker, or a skin changer or something like that. Others can just look at are depicted more or less in various settings as just being able to see someone take on their shape and then try to kill the victim, so there's not two of them walking around. um, Vince says, because I will tell it anyways, doppelganger is a German word. uh, I'm going. I wouldn't know how to pronounce it with the umlaut. I guess the umlaut over the a. The English use is pretty different to what we use it for. Yeah, and I'm sure it is a. There are plenty of creatures in um, mythology and various world cultures that have been absorbed, adopted, transformed over years through tradition and changes in language and such. So there are many ways the doppelganger may come about, and I think uh, if we talk about the origin of the doppelganger, sometimes we can then extrapolate out their purpose in the world. Often, this is the I guess a companion video to the mimic, um, because in many ways, doppelgangers in Dungeons and Dragons, like the mimic, has always been rather nebulous. For good reason as well, because the minute you start to nail down like where they come from, what their purpose is there a nation of them, do they have their own cultures and such? Once you start nailing that down, it becomes pretty hyper specific, and then their use, because they're so omni capable, starts to dwindle down to specifics, and that'll just have to be in your thing. um Vince says we use it for two things: a person who seems to be able to be at two places at once, or a person who naturally looks like another. um it is not a creature. It is used very differently than double, which is a person who tries to look like someone else. And in many ways, that is a possibility. Like, as far as origins go, that it's the old wives' tale of everyone in the world has a twin or a double that exists, and we always take the opinion like half the world. If you went exactly to the opposite side of the world, which of course somebody would probably be standing in the ocean, but when you're a kid, you say, oh, there's probably somebody like me on the opposite side of the world who acts and looks and dresses and seems exactly like me. And there's this weird idea that if you went that direction to try to meet them, that they would somehow be moving in the opposite direction to you, um, you taking their place and them taking your place here. But it's possible that, for example, if doppelgangers are created by the gods to replace people who have either offended them or are living outside the boundaries of some sort of divinity or great and powerful demigods or creatures or something. That could be a possibility. Vince says, I know a couple of people who think they knew me. There's a doppelganger of me somewhere. I think in most of our lives, we've all been that person who's like had the face and you tend to look like someone else. I know I get that quite a bit. Like people will tell me that, you know, they think they knew me from somewhere or they've seen me somewhere. I don't know, maybe I just have an approachable face or something like that. I'm not really sure. Or maybe my doppelganger owes people money, or I don't know. But I've been in plenty of situations, especially traveling and going on vacation and such, where people who don't know me, I go to different states and such, and they are just like, I know you from somewhere. I'm like, I didn't grow up around here. Kind of odd, but it's a possibility that in a particular setting that could be a true thing, where little by little everyone has a duplicate, and the doppelganger isn't specifically shape changing, but is just basically you taking over your life because you are not, quote unquote, living your life correctly or something. There are probably quite a few movies, can't think of their names, where there's a situation where there's someone has a double. The Man in the Iron Mask, you know, that one comes to mind. You know, story of there's a political movie, I think it's called Dave, where, you know, the president is injured or sick or dies or something, and they need this average person to take over their place. And so doppelgangers, I mean, if you want to play a little bit of a comedy of errors, that's a possibility. Spawn, okay. It's another movie. It's like you could, you know, doppelgangers could be altered in your setting to like switch places. Yeah, twin switch place kind of movies, where you've got the rich twin and the poor twin, or, you know, the upper class twin, the lower class twin, and they finally meet each other, or the twins separated at birth and no one said anything, and then all of a sudden they discover each other or go to seek each other after many years, and decide to work together. There's also like the evil twin and the good twin style stories, where, you know, the good twin, we're following the good twin, and then the evil twin is always blaming things, doing evil things, and then blaming them on the other twin. Tesla Rangers says, how about The Sixth Day? Yeah, that was an under. It was an Arnold movie, you know. Yeah, high concept, Arnold in it. It was like, but it was along the lines of like, you know, here's this guy's walking around, doesn't realize that he's the clone of himself, because there's another clone of himself walking around doing things. Multiplicity is another one. And in all these instances, we're actually using the second part of the doppelganger's expertise, which is not just changing shape, which we're basically talking about a doppelganger that has one shape, but the other expertise is their ability to blend in and use that individual's memories or mannerisms, their body language, to fit into their life and just pretty much steal their life away. And the hard part about doing that is it's very easy to, as a DM, to tip your hand that you're using a doppelganger, especially if they are trying to infiltrate one or more of the player characters. It may work better for a doppelganger to take the place of an NPC, and then and that NPC's behavior starts to shift a little bit. Maybe they disappear for long periods of time, or they have a strange kind of behavior. Maybe they stare off into the wild, or they acquire a habit that they normally have spoken of that they are adamantly against, like taking up smoking, or carousing, or not partaking in certain traditions, just because a doppelganger feels uncomfortable or doesn't want to become too public with themselves. Vince says there are also face snatcher who actually steal the faces of others, similar to the faceless men from the Game of Thrones. And that was something that I thought about, that the doppelganger might be like it may be something created on purpose. Like in Game of Thrones, there is a cult slash martial arts academy slash divinity kind of thing where people are taught to steal the faces of their enemies. And of course, in Game of Thrones, like it's far more than just stealing the faces. Like there's a little bit of body shaping going on in there. Maybe half illusion, half shifting the body around, changing someone's perception by assassin priests. Yeah, and it's in your world, instead of like creating a whole new like class option, because this might be something in your world where it's basically player characters hands off, right? But you want it to exist in your world. So instead, maybe there's people who are dead whose faces literally have been severed from their cut meticulously from their bodies, stripped right off of the skull. And these individuals are able to walk around and put these faces on and then become those people by just pressing the skin onto their face. And maybe when in Game of Thrones, I think they were death priests specifically, enacting basically hiding and then killing people and then taking over their essentially making them undead in a certain kind of way. Not in the Dungeons and Dragons version, but that they take over those people, taking over their social interactions in the world, even though those people are dead. In Japanese, there are the gokai, or ghosts who steal the face from still living beings. And that face stealing, that skin walking, you can almost even picture people's entire skins being removed from their bodies, like outfits, and then like stepping into them or slipping into that skin and putting it on. Maybe like what's the movie Men in Black, where the insect is inside of walking around the side of Vincent D'Onofrio, and the skin like kind of is like shifting on his body and whatnot. You could have doppelgangers that do that, and these could literally be human beings or humanoids that have learned this technique or given up their skin or their faces for the rare art to learn how to do it. And that becomes it's like this in this way, they would not be creatures at all. This would be a cult or a specialized organization that goes around like expert assassins. And the Egger suit. Egger wasn't exactly acting quite well. Although the wife should have known that wasn't the proper Egger, but whatever. Maybe she thought he was better. His skin didn't fit, but he would stop trying to be abusive to her. Far better to be an insect inside of a body. Which brings up the instead of a cult that has the ability to train to use this strange cultish arcane art, it could be that the doppelganger itself might be extremely alien. They're more, because in Dungeons and Dragons they're more or less depicted as like gray, their skin probably being a little oily or pasty or something, not having a nose, being a little bit ill-defined as a being, and then taking on another shape. It could be something as insidious as like even the gray shape might not be a shape for them. For example, the Egger suit idea is that like basically it's an insect or insect swarm inside of someone. The doppelganger could be like an ooze of sorts, and when it kills a victim, it like oozes into their body, maybe down into their mouth or something like that, and then and just pretty much decides um, to like kills the person. Somehow like their body turns into a like a sack of some sort, and then they fill that sack with themselves. I'm not describing it very well, but like, the skin becomes like a balloon, and then their body just seeps into it and fills it out, and then they get to walk around as that individual taking them over. There was RP Gamers is taking it to sci-fi for a second. Couldn't you say the agents from the Matrix were doppelgangers of sorts, being able to take on other forms to get around? In the agent Smiths took over people, and science fiction's has a lot of examples of doppelgangers. Everything from computer programs taking over people's minds and basically supplanting them. You could have a situation where you have hackers, and hackers can hack people's minds. Maybe they see a video image, and watching a video image starts to basically download a program into their biological brain, or if they've got cortical stacks, that somehow their cortical stacks get corrupted or something. Absolutely. There was a comic book series about Rom Space Knight. It wasn't read very much, but it was based on a toy. Anyway, he fought the dire wraiths, and the dire wraiths were like these demonic alien creatures, and they had a tongue that had a drill bit basically on the end of it, and they pop people in the back of their head and suck out their brains, and their bodies would be sucked down into like a sack, and then the aliens would take over their bodies, and Rom would walk around with his neutralizer and his analyzer trying to find human beings, and of course Rom looked like the bad guy because he's killing human beings, but really he would only kill dire wraiths. Vince says also there's Changeling, where you get replaced by a supernatural double while you are kidnapped by fairies. That is a common one too, where the original individual is still around somewhere, and the doppelganger for some reason needs them to be alive. Maybe there's some like weird like psychic connection or magical method. Like if the person is dead, they can't take on their form, but if they are alive and held somewhere else, like the man in the iron mask, they didn't kill him and replace him. They imprisoned this individual, prince or whatever is, duke or what have you, or next in line to the throne, and then replace them with a double. And yeah, Tesla says technically, RP Gamer, no, the agents took over the avatars of others. But I see where he's going as a sci-fi method, where if you had agents that are running around in the world, and what they're doing is they can jump into like your PCs, but the NPCs around you, any one of them could be one of these agents or doppelgangers of sorts. I don't think it's that much of it is a difference of using it, but I don't think it's that much of a stretch. I think that you could use that as a threat, especially if the PCs are like in a big giant mall or habitat or something surrounded by thousands of people, and they're like, oh shit, any of these guys could be against us. Yeah, the agents are essentially more like body snatchers. I guess that yeah, body snatchers similar. Yeah, I mean, remember like Prue says Rakshasas too. Rakshasas are a good example of a extremely intelligent and insidious body snatcher. If I'm haven't seen Invasion of the Body Snatchers in a long time, but essentially they were these like pods. They would kidnap people and put you in like a cocoon, and you'd be inside this milky substance, and then the cocoons would grow another body, and then that body would become you. I don't know if they were, I guess it was combination plant cloning factory kind of thing. In Changeling, Vince says in Changeling, just like to mess with the kidnapped individual. For example, a great dancer has to dance until their legs break to entertain the fairy lords. Oh, that's nasty. In D&D, there are tons of creatures who can change forms. Even dragons do so. Imps, some familiars can even do so. That idea of like impersonation is that's the doppelganger's epitome. There are plenty of there's plenty of dragons, like you said, imps, fiends, celestials do it as well, for a short amount of times. The Rakshasa is a great one. Hags are known to, for short periods of time take on the form of like beautiful maidens or advisors to viziers or something like that. Jinn and Ifrit, that culture, I'm gonna say like Persian, Middle Eastern styled Arabian Nights kind of thing, where they have plenty of like wizards and powerful beings that are able to take on other shapes. I think even sphinxes and naga may have some abilities to do that as well. The oni, ogre magi, can take on other shapes. I think Finn says that's why the doppelganger has to have additional abilities to be able to be unique in D&D. I think they often have the ability to copy thoughts and abilities, and I think the copying of the ability to copy the thoughts and abilities of their victims, especially those memories, though the things that point them out as being exactly like the individual, I think is what makes the doppelganger insidious versus the other ones. Whereas the other ones can take on a human shape, but it's usually not a specific individual, or at least not for very long. They may appear as a specific individual temporarily and then they disappear, or they do it for a very short amount of time, maybe to deliver a message, or they become what we would call a generic individual, move into a society, act in that society. Let's say you're a celestial or like a silver dragon or something like that, and their actions are basically manipulating humanoid society, and then they leave and do something else, as opposed to taking on kidnapping someone and taking that specific individual, whether it's a king or a knight or a wizard, or taking over their abilities, and being able to take those memories to make a perfect copy. It's like a weird violation. It's one of those things where they're hard to use in a game, because the player characters, whenever we make a player character, there's the unwritten rule that my player character is unique in this world. There are no others like them. No matter what society they come from, no matter what they've learned, no matter who it is that they are associated with, whether they're part of an assassin's guild or martial arts clan, or they're a knight, that individual you are playing as a player character is unique in the world, and there are none like them. And the doppelganger, it violates that. It steals. It's not them stealing their gold or their magic items. It's like it's stealing them and who they are. And when crimes get blamed on them, or their loved ones are blaming the PCs for showing up and making a fool of themselves, and the PCs are like, I'm a murder hobo. I haven't been home in years. Why are you talking about this? Doppelgangers can really affect the PC's reputation. And I think that's where the threat comes in. It's not the physical threat. Doppelgangers physically aren't that capable, but the threats to reputation, whether it's a knight in a knight's order and they're no longer thought of as being upright and lawful and just, or whether it's a thieves guild and they reneged on a deal, and the rogue comes back into town and is like, I didn't make any of these deals. It's the noble that is caught up in court intrigue that they had nothing to do with, and trying to unravel or uncover the actions of this doppelganger, I think is where their power comes from. In many ways, the doppelganger, it's like they're a mid-level creature, but they are a big bad in in their overall effects on the world. Vince says the big question is, do you make rules for how to identify a doppelganger? Could you make a murder mystery with a doppelganger involved and give the PCs no real clue to find them? I think that in order to do that, the clues would come from the PCs themselves, right? Because they can make a perfect copy. So then the PC kind of has to think, okay, in this situation, if this person is me, what would I do? Like, would I go, well, hell yeah. The Tesla Ranger says the thing, where you've got an enclosed location that's, where all the people involved in the murder mystery can't leave, usually like snowed in, or they're on a train, they're trapped in a faraway hotel or something, they're on a sailing vessel of some sort, maybe like a luxury liner, and there's a murder, and this murderer can take on the shape of anyone in the group, or basically takes over the shape of one individual and then trying to find them. Vince says basically yes, but they didn't have a method to find a thing. Blood or something. Well, in the thing, they discovered that heat applied, or like an electrical charge or heat applied to the blood, forces this shape changing thing to erupt from wherever it was at, and even to the last minute, it pretended, it started blaming other people, pointing a finger at others, so that it wouldn't be detected. I absolutely believe that you could have some kind of game statistics. It doesn't say so, but having a tell, whether it's like leaving behind like some kind of slimy trail, or its eyes always blink sideways, or it reacts to a certain sound frequency, or there's a plant that it is extremely attracted to and always wears, or always has around it a vase, or this herb like or flower pinned to its lapel or in its hair or something. The movie Fallen, Denzel Washington, demons, whatever, Azazel or something would take over people's minds. This wasn't exactly a doppelganger, but it was a ancient evil spirit that would go into other people, and it always sang the song, time is on my side. Yes, it is. And Denzel figured it out. Like, this thing just had, it was just a murderer, but it would always do this song that time's always on my side. And so it could have a hum, or maybe some kind of poetic verse it says, or a turn of phrase. Maybe it has a turn of phrase where, like Matt Colville's doobly-doo, like maybe it uses some turn of phrase all the time, where and the PCs can hear that phrase, and then maybe try to, it hears that person say it, and then they chase this thing down through a city, or through habitats, or into the sewer systems, or across rooftops, only to lose them in a crowd, and then they hear it again from someone else. You'd have to make your own rules or rulings about it, but that would be interesting, especially if doppelgangers are doppelgangers are a thing that is prominent in the world. Not that there's a society of them, but maybe the PCs are literally doppelganger hunters, and if they can they have to root out these body snatchers, and then if they can find the tell, they can find the doppelganger. Looking at looking at the chat. Tesla says there was an episode of Outer Limits where Jack the Ripper was an alien who jumped from body to body. Star Trek 2, yes. Vince says in Eberron there's a race of changelings. I always like the idea of playing them, a character which has no real personality of his own, but imitates others sounds interesting. I played a changeling one time who the background was given birth. The king saved his life because the his son fell in love with a woman who actually was a doppelganger, and the doppelganger fell in love with the prince and gave birth to a child. And then during the childbirth, the woman changed into the doppelganger. Doppelganger was killed. The child was born. The king felt remorse. The son ran off and became basically the big bad. And then in my character story, and then the child was raised in by the king, hidden away, and became like an agent. So it was a way for the character to be like an assassin spy of sorts, but for this goodly country, basically like a lawful evil character supporting a lawful and just society. RP says, I have a question. If a doppelganger takes the memories or feelings, etc., to become a perfect copy, do you think it's possible for the doppelganger to get lost in that person? See, that's something that came up before we talked about, where like, why do they do it? Like, we know that they do it, okay, but why do they do it? Is just a biological function of them to live? Because in many ways, if statistically speaking, if they want to survive longer, they should perform less violent acts, which means that if it requires them to kill someone or kidnap someone to take over their life, then it would go to show that if they're intelligent, they would not want to continue killing people. Yeah, why do they do the voodoo that they do? It's like, you know, if you had to live that way, you wouldn't kill very many people, especially in a small enclosed society, like on a space habitat or a small village or something. You would really want to like kill maybe one person a year or every 20 years or something, and just live as that person. Make some, you know, you kill someone, take over their body, go move to another location where no one knows you and can figure out your little foibles, and then remain that person for 50 years and then move on to another body, right? So why are they violent, or why are they consistently violent? It's like, what is their larger purpose? Vince says, this reminds me of Zeta from Batman Beyond, where a doppelganger holographic robot had to infiltrate the life of another person and develop a personality and did not want to kill anymore. There was even a spin-off series for him. And, you know, we often talk about doppelgangers being insidious adversaries, but what if there are far more living in society and they just don't want to kill, or they take over the personality of someone who doesn't want to be violent or kill? And even amongst their own kind, like, they don't think that's, to them, they may not think that's odd. Like, if they take over the body of someone who just a farmer, just wants to farm their land, and doesn't want to be involved in politics or assassinations or anything, that might just be a normal course of their behavior. Like, oh, I guess this person doesn't want to kill, I guess I won't either. Unless there is, like, the mind flayers or illithids, maybe there is a greater being, or it's possible doppelgangers they're like Highlanders, immortals, maybe that they are biologically opposed to each other, and that when doppelgangers meet, they have like a shadow war amongst each other, simply because they know that if two or more doppelgangers in the same region, you know, like, they have territory, almost like you know, like wolves or, you know, felines or something. They have specific territories, and if that territory is violated, they know that they could be outed because of the actions of yet another doppelganger. And, you know, trusting each other might not be, it might not be in their nature, because, you know, it's like vampires. Like, hey, I might be a really good vampire and hide my kills, but the other guy might not be very, very good at doing it. RP Gamer says, I remember that character. Robots could definitely be the doppelganger of the future. Maybe Prue says maybe they have to do it because if they don't, they'll die from some sort of hunger or malnutrition, malnourishment. And it could be that the nutritional value of taking over others might not be physical. It might be psychic. Like maybe they cannot hold on to the memories as long as we think. Like I said, 50 years. Maybe it's a year at best, and eventually they start losing, like they're addicted to or need the emotional context. So they can remember they can remember passwords and people's names, but over time maybe they lose that information, and they are addicted to the emotions. They're addicted to the passions, the joys, the hates, the fears. RP says maybe doppelgangers can only form memories and feel while in that form, right? And it could be that they're like soul collectors of sorts, like a drug addict in many ways. Like they have, by taking over other people, they love to feel their the events that they've gone through, like a warm blanket. And so maybe that drives them towards people who have an adventurous nature. So sure, doppelgangers could kill farmers here and there and stay hidden, but the average farmer doesn't have an adventurous life, so they don't have those peaks. They don't have those high peaks and low valleys. And maybe doppelgangers go after people who are of themselves exceptional, people that are daredevils, that are adventurers, that are dynamic in the way they think and act, fanatics, people who have are on the extremes of the psychological spectrum of that society. And so maybe that's why player characters tend to be victims, or player character types tend to be victims more than your average citizen who doesn't go very far, doesn't learn very many things, doesn't have a lot of lost loves, great hatreds, vengeance, things like that in their heart. In a Witcher book, there was a doppelganger creature who took over the life of a halfling merchant's life and was actually pretty friendly and just did not want to run around in the woods anymore. He was an extremely good trader. The adventure was about finding what he did trade and why. There is a possibility that some doppelgangers are like, they're completely aware of this addiction and try to fight that addiction. So even though they are drawn towards it, maybe many of them want to hide as they don't want to be involved in drama, but they are drawn to it. Like a vampire's drawn to blood, right? It's like, yes, I'm a vampire and I can feed on animals, but chickens and turkeys every once in a while kill a sheep or a cow or a horse or something, but there's nothing like human beings. And maybe doppelgangers are the same way, but it's because of their draining of the spirit of sorts. It could also be that doppelgangers are quite insidious and intelligent, and they take pride in what they do. And also what we're talking about, it doesn't mean every doppelganger has the same personality. So if there's a society of them, it could be that maybe a doppelganger wants the help of the PCs to root out others, right? And maybe this one doppelganger is an ally and tries to help the PCs find other doppelgangers. This says, what if doppelgangers are actually good creatures and infiltrate evil organizations to spy for good organizations, and it is a trained supernatural ability? Doppelgangers could be reverse druids, so they could be animals who learn to take humanoid shape and intelligence. And I don't know how true this is. In the game Feng Shui, you can play someone known as the Ascended. like a jackal wear. Yeah. The ascended were in feng shui were animals that were jealous of humanity and took on the shapes of human beings, but they retained their animal abilities. So when they became human beings, let's say you were a mantis and you became a human being, you could then fight like you had like mantis martial arts, right? Like you could fight like a mantis and grapple. Or if you were a bear and you became a human being, and this was a one-way trip, right? So the ascended had a one-way trip. So if you were a human being, and you were a bear, became a human being, you would live as a human being, but you still had the strength and rage, and I guess hibernation of a bear, but you would just look like a human being. Yeah, Prue says they could work for the Harpers, and it could be that doppelgangers might be absolutely neutral in your world, like not that they're not evil or good, but that they are working to preserve the way of society. They're just doing it in an insidious manner, whether they're like being assassins or they are just infiltrators. They're not killers. This is for example, yeah, they are just so often evil that a change of perspective could be interesting, right? Maybe their perspective could be extremely long-lived, and there are like doppelgangers could be rooting out the shape-changing dragons or rakshasa or hags or something in the world that others that the doppelganger okay, I'm extrapolating here, right? The doppelganger tends to be like chaotic evil, or at least neutral evil, if I'm not mistaken. I'm not going to look it up, but they tend to be of an evil alignment, simply because of their actions. But it could be that those actions, while in society, are rated as evil, and self-serving, could serve a higher purpose for a longer period of time. Yeah, imagine a doppelganger asking beforehand if they could please borrow your looks and personality for some project or another, or maybe for payment. How would a PC react to that request? That's a good one, Prue. Like, I mean, I suppose if you're doing like a Matt Click Umber Cloak styled game where everyone is like the city plays in the city of shadows, and doppelganger, all the PCs, no matter what class you play, is somehow a shadowy figure. Even the paladins are like fighting the good fight in the shadows, and maybe these doppelgangers are like just another facet of that type of thing, and they could be powerful allies, but they ask very strange requests. That would be odd, especially if there's more than one of them, right? Imagine like a triumvirate of them, and the PCs go to meet them, and flowing out of the shadows are like, a dozen or more of these shadowy figures who walk into the crowd and just take on the faces and mannerisms of like Joe Average, as they slip into the shadows or something. Infinite says, what if doppelgangers are born or created by someone constantly wanting to be doing something other than what they're doing, creating a version of themselves that starts acting out their desires, almost like what's the spell? A clone or simulacrum or something, like a wizard or an organization creates these people as copies of themselves to engage in the world, and maybe that they are willing participants or unwilling participants or unconscious participants in one single greater being's desire to interact with the world. Yeah, or a PC RP says, or the PCs have paid them to do an activity they don't want to do, and then hilarity ensues. Yeah, they could be, hey, I actually need to be in court, but I want to go adventuring, so can you take my place? That would be interesting if the PCs have a lot of like domestic responsibilities, and the doppelgangers like are paid to not to cause trouble, but to actually like maintain other people's lives, that'd be a pretty good service, actually. Infinite says, and eventually taking over your life, but is primal and driven primarily by their identity, always doing what they will, regardless of law or social correctness. Vincent says, yeah, what if doppelgangers would be the default replacement character? They are creatures who completely take over the mind and personality of a dead creature. Yeah. Prue says, a doppelganger seeking out families of dying children or relatives and offering to take the form of the dying loved one and stay with the family. Someone might accept in the throes of grief. Whew. Man, DBJ, can I jump in and chat with you? Yeah, absolutely. I'll send it to you. So, doppelgangers are like so, I don't know how to say it. Like there's so much, what's the way to say it? Fuel that they offer, that it's incredible. What kind of ideas you can come with, especially the more intelligent they become. I tend to think of them as being far more excellent in what you can, in their goals and actions and activities and such. Hey, dude, what's up?
There we go. I forgot I didn't have my camera up.
Yeah, man. What to say? RP says, imagine someone keeps a group of doppelgangers around to take their form when they get too old so as not to look weakened. An ancient, maybe a lich, which looks old and, desiccated, might have a reason to have one or more doppelgangers around so it can live this like young, immortal life. Maybe even being a little jealous of the doppelgangers for being able to live such a full young life, because the lich's purpose is to be like immortal and hunt down these great powers and whatnot. That would be kind of cool. That would be very interesting.
I just get one thing, like doppelgangers exists, but in a lot of fantasy games where doppelgangers exist, so too do changelings. All right, changelings are often shape changers in the same way that doppelgangers are, but it's the nature of what they are that creates the difference. Right.
Yeah, and maybe like because RP says kings and queens did it all the time. It could be that maybe like doppelgangers are very common, but the goal is to try to find them in society, not to kill them, but maybe to get them to choose a side. So like maybe their purpose is to is to copy people. Yeah, I can imagine that. Stop copying me, but it could be that they are replacing people. Replacing people. So like maybe the rich or the elite can go about their, I don't know, dark desires or something, and to convince the doppelgangers to become allies to uncover or work against evil would be interesting, and that they are, primarily neutral creatures or beings, especially if they're created, right? If they're created to be, I don't know, workhorses for people's lives, that'd be kind of a strange thing.
I think, by the way, when you read my comment and said the identity, it was the id, as in the id, superego, and ego.
Okay.
It's supposed to, I think the id is the primal, the desire part of your brain, right? The thought of that the doppelganger is born from someone's desires, becoming this like ethereal creature which coalesces into a physicality and acts out one's desires until they consume that person's life, eliminating that person and then acting out all of that person's desires, starting off as a neutral creature, but depending on the person that bore them, they may lean more towards evil or good, but they're a creature not mitigated by the ego and superego, not thinking out consequences, but just acting out on desire alone.
It could be that they are it's in some ways they are jealous of people, so that people who are living, in their opinion, unfulfilled lives, and so they could be um, their chaotic nature might not be that they're just wild, but that people who are not engaging in society like by their base pleasures, that the doppelganger is like, look, if you're not going to do it, you're wasting your life. Maybe I'll do it for you. In essence, like let me show you what living a full life would be. And of course, they're going around offending people and maybe even engaging in dangerous acts, murdering people. Yeah, and they're of course in the chat, they're like, you're talking about uh, doppelgangers being part of this like elite society, where the doppelgangers and the people are like being blamed for the other person's actions, knowing that the doppelgangers really exist. I actually do believe that doppelgangers would be able to sense other doppelgangers. I think that makes a lot of sense to me. Um, I'm sure they're experts at trying to hide from each other, but I would guess that there are probably certain tells that they each have, whether it's like a food they won't eat or a place they won't go. Maybe they avoid like
It's like
religious
telling the difference between two twins,
Yeah,
identical twins. Like if you spend enough time with identical twins, I grew up with two of my friends who were identical twins, and I don't even know what was different about them. I just knew who was who.
yeah. I'm sure it's the classic they all look alike kind of thing. You know what I mean? Right? I'm sure amongst other doppelgangers, like they know each other by sight. Probably they may even greet each other in a specific kind of way, or when they do a handshake, to them it's like a blending of their flesh, but we don't see it. You know, and that could be their way of like communicating or passing notes or something. But they could be passing identities around. Almost, they could be like soul traders in many ways. Um, Maybe multiple doppelgangers could take over one individual's life. So a political figure whose personality has changed over time could actually be multiple different doppelgangers, each of them taking over as another doppelganger leaves to go into another person's life, which would be kind of strange. Yeah, I mean, God, you could do so much with my brain's reeling about all the ideas, man.
Yeah, like
Um,
um, doppelganger. Like I'm seeing in chat, doppelganger. The ideas for a doppelganger are seem to be following the line of logic, in the way that we in our modern day use the word doppelganger, right? But actually, not too long ago, a couple days ago, I watched a video about one of the myths about doppelgangers and the stories of where they first arose. And doppelgangers were originally ghostly creatures and not physical, right? And that's kind of what they were born as. Like they would start doing something that who they were copying was doing. They would do the exact same thing, and then they would do something that the person wanted to do but couldn't do at the time, and then they would do their own thing, and then eventually that person would die, right? And everyone could kind of tell who the doppelganger was, because there was always this ethereality that surrounded them, something ghostly about them, even when the original died and the doppelganger would remain. And doppelgangers were always omens of death. Whoever they appeared as would soon die, though they wouldn't be the ones that killed them.
yeah, and that's where I think sometimes we underplay the fairy tale wives tale classic part of that, which actually be a really good thing to do. Whether it's like a curse, like if a doppelganger is seen in the community, um, acting as that person, that the it's not that they want to hunt down the doppelganger, but that the person being copied maybe is destined to die, or maybe they're engaging in things that aren't quite normal in society. And this is like it's the telltale sign that your life is not being you're not living your life correctly. Um, and people begin to prefer the doppelganger over the real person. With the people knowing full well that you're being copied, that could be interesting, or even like a blood curse or something, or even a patron of sorts. Like people can, when people beseech evil, it could be that someone wants to live and this patron turns them into a doppelganger. But the curse is that, yes, they live longer and they could try to maintain their own life, but they start losing their memories or even the emotional connection to those memories. And so it becomes this further addiction to copy someone else, take over their life, get their passions, and then again it starts to drain away and they lose it, and then they have to keep moving on and on. And
There's,
so yeah, go ahead.
well, so like somebody that uses the ultra self spell way too much.
Yeah, that's very true. Hell, even mirror image or something, right? A mage or someone starts like creating these copies of themselves, whether it's like spiritual or illusionary or something, and eventually the overuse of it starts taking over, and maybe the illusions start talking back to this individual, and eventually the illusions are like coaxing out of this powerful mage, like, no, let me do one more thing for you, you're too busy, I'll do it for you. And eventually the illusion becomes the real person and leaves.
You're making me think of something, but so is Vincent. Vincent says, what if a specific race simply loses all personality when it gets old and has to imitate others to stay alive? They have to switch regularly. And then you said what you said, and it's making me think of changelings. All right, not D&D changelings, or maybe D&D changelings, but the original myth of, or one of the original myths, I guess, one that I know of changelings is that women who couldn't have children would pray for children, and eventually fairies would come and like give them children. That's one of. There's another myth where they switch out kids and they steal kids. But let's say that's the case too. A fairy would come and steal a human child and leave a changeling in its place.
Yeah.
Right. And in that myth, the changeling would soon die after, so that the humans would think that their child died rather than was stolen. But I kind of like in SMTT, I switched the myth where changelings would grow up thinking that they're the race that they are, and if they were to ever realize that they're a changeling, that's when their shape-changing abilities kicked in. What if like those kind of changelings would grow old and senile, suffering from the degenerative mental diseases and not really know who they are and start picking other people to be? Because they could, like what you were saying, with the different personalities and never really being able to grasp on,
Man, I could. So maybe that's how doppelgangers breed in a certain way. Like there, that is a very classic thing where children were stolen and replaced. And I'm sure in real life, any number of things could happen, whether maybe that's just because of a psychological issue that the mom or the parents had at the time, or maybe there's like dementia, or even like it could be that certain behaviors in this culture they thought of as being odd, even though to us it might not be that way. But in a fantasy realm, it's possible that doppelgangers might, that's how they place their young by replacing other young in there, like babies and such, and they are inducted into the like larger doppelganger society once they get old enough to realize what they are. And it could be whether it's like puberty, it could be when they get old and die or senile, it could be from like a head injury and they lose their memories, and then they naturally start trying to pick up other people's behaviors or memories, which would be kind of insidious, because they could have replaced someone for 20, 30 years, 80 years, and no one knows it until that person realizes it, and then realizes like, whoa, I'm not an elf, I'm not a halfling, I'm not a human being, I'm actually part of this other society. And whether they accept it or not, maybe they try to fight it off for years or even generations, and until this larger doppelganger society is like, yeah, we've got a couple hundred years, they'll come into our fold, don't worry about it, you know. That would be very interesting as well. RP Gamers likes the cuckoo birds replacing other birds young. The baby birds even replicate the calls of the baby birds they've replaced to trick the parent. Ooh. That's pretty nasty if you think about like what happens to the original baby. Is there like a way to transform the original baby or induct them into the or maybe maybe the babies are stolen, the doppelgangers put their own changeling baby with the parents, and then the little small babies are then traded to like another powerful being, inducted into another society or something. And that would be interesting to bring the two kids back together again.
Like in Troll Slayer.
Yes. Or what? Damn, there's you could have the Freaky Friday thing with the two kids come from different walks of life, except like one's a doppelganger in normal life and one's a normal human in doppelganger life. Weird.
That could be.
Yeah, the human being learns to be an expert person that can make disguises, but they're still human. Like they have no arcane abilities. And then they go into society hiding amongst everyone, looking for their counterpart.
I mean, there's a bunch of things. Like one thing that I was thinking about, because I love, you know, like using my creativity, like the thread, holding together ideas that don't normally go together or were never really intended to be together. So the idea, like, okay, a changeling is one of the races. They realize that they can change shape, that they're not actually human or not actually dwarven. So then they take on, they make the choice whether to remain a dwarf or to become what they are, which is a changeling, right? To embrace what they are. And then maybe sometime down the line, there's a god of death that likes to use changelings to carry out their will because they can be anyone at any time, right? And comes to the changeling and wants to give them like this mantle of death, right? This like death's executioner. And depending on whether they accept it or not, if they accept it, they become a doppelganger, which is someone who changes shape and kills the person that they're searched for, right? Or they could be cursed by the god of death and they become mimics. Still, you know, cursed to kill, but now with little to no will of their own.
Right. And maybe, you know, there's of course plenty of quests where this imperative to kill and take over, maybe they're trying to find a cure for it, or there's they've heard legend that there's a way to stop this kind of thing. And even in the chat, they were talking more generally about gypsy culture, and many gypsies were blamed for this because they were just like nomadic and kind of mysterious or something. But it could be that the gypsies know how to root out the doppelgangers in society, and because they're able to root them out, they're kind of being blamed for it, but they're actually they actually know how to find those individuals, and maybe those individuals don't even know that they're doppelgangers.
Wait, right? Let me tell Vincent something. Vincent says having a domesticated mimic would be awesome. Actually, Vincent, in Saturday Morning Tabletop, changeling is a race that you could play, and mimic is a feat that you can get. So you can become a mimic in the game. So you can actually play a mimic instead of having a domesticated one. Anyway, go ahead.
Oh man, yeah, and that relationship between that odd ephemeral relationship between like doppelgangers and mimics, where they really don't fit in the world. I mean, they exist. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying they shouldn't be there, but they've never really had a background, a true like this is exactly where they come from, on purpose, of course. But that relationship where the doppelganger is more or less the living humanoid creature, the mimic is more or less the inanimate object styled creature, and that relationship, like whether is do mimics grow up to be doppelgangers? Do they learn it? Are they like a separate species of sorts from the same way? Do maybe doppelgangers could even have their own culture somewhere else? Uh, Hollow Earth kind of thing, an alien planet. Maybe they're along the lines of illithids, mind flayers, and they have their own world where it's just like it's like an ooze, an amorphous blob or something like that, and little shoots can escape from there or leave their world and take on solid shapes other places. So they're like domesticated dogs in a way. The
What if
doppelganger is
no?
in that house.
What if it was like an invasion of the body snatchers thing, right? Where like these creatures, aliens, fae, whatever, right? Whatever setting you want, regardless of setting, um, procreated by, like you said, like this ooze, right? And they would inject this ooze into little babies, child's fetus, whatever stage of development before maturity, right? Very, very, very early stages of development. They would grow up, figure out that they could change shape, right? But like when that body would die, you know, everything but the flesh, like the skin would rot, the muscle, the bones, and the organs. And they would always need a structure to take form. So the ooze would become sentient and become the doppelganger, like the zombie version, you know, in air quotes, not really dead, but in air quotes, the zombie version of the changeling, constantly, you know, digging up graves and getting bones to change it to different creatures, and it would be the skin that would change shape, color, and stuff. And the mimic would be the stage in the life cycle where they would no longer need support to take on solid form.
Coming at it from a different angle. See that? Vince actually brings up something that was a classic thing in AD&D. Doppelgangers are actually mirror dimension versions of the actual person. There was a trap/cursed magic item that when you looked in it, your opposite would step out of the mirror and fight you, and if you lost, your mirror image would go on to live your life. Although I think it always had the opposite of your alignment. So if you were lawful good, a chaotic evil version of yourself would step through with all your exact abilities, and then you'd have a big fight or something. Mirror of opposition, that's it. That was a classic one too. Not as popular as the Sphere of Annihilation, but it was up there, and that was a great DM tool. Like, oh, I don't have an enemy, I know what to do. I'll just make copies of them and have them fight themselves. You know, that was a thing. You have a dark room. The room lights up, someone throws light in the room, and then their copies come out. But it could be a planar travel kind of thing as well. That the when this other realm is pierced, a copy of you steps through into this world, and then that copy comes in, and in order for that copy to remain here, somehow it has to take over your life, essentially. Which wouldn't really make it a doppelganger in the shape-changing sense, but it would in the I am a duplicate of this other person, thoughts, memories, etc. Kind of like the movie Face Off. You know, yeah, you know, it's like, hey, I'm the evil version of you, but my evilness is better than your goodness in your own life. You know, people start.
Well, it's also like Evil Dead, Army of Darkness. The first time he had his own doppelganger. He looked in the mirror, and his reflection actually came out of the mirror, came to life. And during the movie, it began to, you know, it started to decay and rot and become more of a zombie version of himself. But originally, it's his doppelganger. And I guess, spoiler alert, if anybody wants to watch the series, Evil Dead, his mirror image makes, you know, a comeback in the series as well. And he's got to fight his mirror image, and it, you know, throws things on its head. But instead of this whole different dimension thing, because I think sometimes storytellers rely on alternate dimensions or parallel dimensions a little too much when there is a lot that could be done in a single dimension. Wherein, like, I love magic to be dangerous or at least a bit unpredictable. So having a few things like we said before about maybe doppelgangers are born by someone who uses the ultra self spell too much, where the illusion is made real and now they get lost within the countless illusions, right? Always altering themselves to be someone else because they've lost who they are, right? I did a video like I think 2 years ago about vampires where like true vampires or original vampires are actually a wizard's clone from the clone spell that gains sentience and is always looking to they drink blood because they want to consume life because they're not really alive. They're just a copy. They're a soulless copy waiting for the wizard's soul to inhabit them, you know? Like things like that, like perverting magic, or doppelgangers can be born from the mirror image spell. Like one time you cast mirror image, and instead of copying you and helping you, they all turn on you and beat you down, you know?
Could you imagine an illusionist wizard or even like an arcane trickster that, you know, unconsciously starts taking on like their illusions start taking on the form of other people and even they don't realize it? So like the players walking through a town and people are greeting them like, you know, hi sir, how are you, sir? And the character's like, I'm female. Why is everyone calling me sir? But they woke up that morning and took on the illusion of an older gentleman, and then eventually they start acting like an older gentleman until they become one, right? Like like you said, magic becomes dangerous. That overuse of it, they have these artificial, illusionary identities, but the identities start to become more and more real until this individual becomes a doppelganger. The magic just actually corrupts them until they just become a real doppelganger and they want to live these artificial lives of other people.
Like a slow, gradual form of magical schizophrenia.
Yeah. Maybe illusion magic, there's this greater desire, like, sure, I can create something out of my mind, but if I actually take someone's memories, I can make this illusion better. If I just a little bit more, and that desire to want to make something just a little bit more realistic, a little bit more believable, goes down this like dark path of watching people, how, you know, who they are, kidnapping people, and then eventually becoming a real doppelganger where you want to take over their lives. And then even that isn't enough. They start killing more and more people. But just because the magic fades away and they lose it after all that trouble they went through, and I got to kill somebody again, you know, to take over this other person. And they,
before chat starts blowing up, I want to mention something Jared typed.
Yeah.
Was it a two-parter, Jared?
Yeah.
In Silent Hill 2, there's a sinister magic that creates a replication of the main character's dead wife, but changed to a more ideal form. The metaphor used treated more like you only loved her for her body and the way she looked, and so it becomes a very personal, reflective storytelling tool. Now that sounds a little bit off topic as far as doppelgangers are concerned, but it sounds awesome because we're talking about illusion magic anyway, right? So maybe not necessarily on topic with the doppelgangers, but imagine some form of emotional turmoil being reflected in your illusion magic that you can control. Like, hey, you want to create an illusion of someone standing in the corner to distract the guard, and you actually create the GM describes your illusion as your dead wife, or dead lover or dead family member, even though that's not what you intended, right? You cast alter self, but instead of looking like the noble, you start looking like, and maybe use that as a storytelling tool, or have a doppelganger character who can't help but perform evil deeds because they're a human that's been driven mad by their own illusion magic for that purpose,
Well, I think I could see a doppelganger taking advantage of someone's like earlier in the chat. I think it was RP that said it about using someone's grief. A doppelganger becomes a more idealized version of someone's lost loved one, or someone's murdered loved one, or something. Like, I'll, Summersby was a drama movie, but I'm going to use this as an example where a very abusive drunk leaves the village town or something. He goes off to war. A doppelganger takes him over, comes back to town, and has a better attitude. Maybe he's got a wife that he abused in the town. He was always drunk and was just evil and mean, and then comes back and has like a better attitude and starts to work on the farm, rebuild people's houses, defend the village from the neighboring town that always likes to come and steal their stuff or whatever, bandits or whatever. And then these people are like, I like this guy better than the other guy. Like, I don't care that he's not the real person. Like we don't. There's something about him. I know it's not really him, but he looks and sounds like old, Brutal Bill. But I like this guy.
Kind of like the Stepford Wives.
Yeah. It's we know there's that uncanny valley where the person knows it's not really them, but they're just like, hey, I'm just glad that the other person's gone. This person is so great. Yeah, you could really play around with that so much. Like,
all right, so what if, right? Because I'm looking at chat and then I see Monster Monday, and now I don't know why, but it's like, okay, we're thinking very creative stuff, but not monstrous stuff, right?
True.
So doppelgangers being so similar to changelings, and let's say in D&D, the only difference is that a doppelganger is in the monster manual and the changeling is a player character. Right? That's the biggest difference between them, which creates inherent limitations via the mechanics. But what if a changeling was, mystical in nature, and a doppelganger was a bit more scientific? Right? Where building off of the comment before about, hey, what if a doppelganger was flesh that needed bones for structure? What if the doppelganger was more, I forget the name of the monster, but there's a monster that is a colony of insects that takes on a humanoid form. What if a doppelganger did the same, but these insects were like chameleons and able to change, or octopi, and octopi or squid, able to change like their outward, make minor changes to the texture and color of their carapace, and through a symphony of like little chirps and the sounds different bugs make, crickets and coqui is a frog, but locusts, able to formulate language to talk, but it was definitely not natural speech. So doppelgangers appeared in a way that was how they wanted to in appearance alone, but never sound, right? And then fighting a doppelganger, you might fight an individual, or they may like start separating into colonies, and you see these insects puppeteering things. And what they did was that this swarm of insects would swarm a weaker creature and start devouring them, and then, allow themselves to be worn as that creature's skin as they're eating away at them. Like those little, I don't know what they call it, those little parasites inside fish that eat away the tongue and then pretend to be the tongue, but on the outside,
Yeah. That sounds insidious. Like it's this weird, like, because even Vincent brings up the fact of, there was a character in the Girl Power comic who claimed to be a colony of intelligent spiders and spun silk like to make the body. He said it was a lie, but still, like, it doesn't. We don't have to let the doppelganger just be a humanoid in like when it's in its normal form. Like, we could have it be a colony of insects and ooze, something assembled from a hive mind of sorts, almost like nanotechnology. And even Jared says, brings up the point that obviously doppelgangers can't show up with someone else's face. They need to wait for a perfect social moment or weakness they can exploit or betray. So often we think of doppelgangers operating alone, but they're probably pretty intelligent because they don't want to be seen. So it could be that they're constantly pulling the strings so that the PCs or the people hunting them are always confronting something else, like basically the lethal triangle, right? You're hunting the doppelganger. The doppelganger turns the corner of an alley. The PCs turn the corner, and then they confront, I don't know, a minotaur and a couple of his ogre thugs or something. The doppelganger gets away. The PCs bump into the ogres who just are itching for a fight, and then a fight breaks out. Doppelganger leaves. Doppelganger shows up again. PCs go after him. Doppelganger throws another barrier in the way, uses another agent, becomes a like it doesn't become the king, becomes the kingmaker. Always the advisor to push individuals and people and situations in the way of those who are trying to hunt it. Almost like the doppelganger becomes the BFF of these other creatures, simply to defend itself, just in case what it's trying to do is uncovered, right? I could see that happening a lot, especially in fantasy and science fiction too. In science fiction, whether it's like nanotechnology or invasion of body snatchers or something, they're going to want like the movie The Thing, right? This blob comes in, takes over people's bodies, but it also starts pointing at other people like, hey, Joe and Karen, they're acting kind of strange. You might want to investigate them. And everyone's like, yeah, they sure are acting strange. We're going to lock them up. And the doppelgangers running around creating chaos. So that could very well be part of its chaotic evil nature, where it is perfectly, like you said, scientifically creating chaos in socially to defend itself, so that no one looks at them in an odd way. Like, oh, Joe's acting kind of strange, but hey, Karen and Bob, I don't know, those guys are really strange. And you know what I'm saying? Like, it's it's disrupting the attention and spreading it out amongst everywhere. Could be a setup for adventure where some adventurers get replaced. And I guess that's the last thing, because I'm going a little long, because actually I gotta go. I can't do these 2-hour ones any longer, because I am heading back to work. But I will say that that getting a player on your side to play a doppelganger, while doesn't work all the time, is actually a good trick to pull them aside and say, hey, you know what, your PC was taken out. I'm giving you a stat block. You're just going to play this. You are playing a doppelganger from now on, right? And then maybe the real PC comes back because they're kidnapped or sent to another place, or they lost their memory. Doesn't really matter, right? But to have this, or maybe the PC is actually dead, and you have somebody in the group who loves playing these like strange, different things, or maybe they got bored with their character. Like, it's just not fitting in. Okay, take away. You're going to play a doppelganger from now on.
If your player character that you get on board for this is a GM and knows how to, tell their own story, and they buy into what you want to do, it could be really awesome. Because I did that for a one shot. As a player, I was playing a Cryfoth game, right? And at like the last second, Megan was like, "Do you want to be a traitor?" And I said, "Yeah, sure, why not?" So I constantly played the character as always, oh, here's combat. I'm distancing myself because all I do is ranged attacks, when that was not the case. Like, I had plotted and schemed to put my allies to sleep as soon as the proverbial poop hit the fan. And it worked out, It was a cool sort of gotcha moment without necessarily being too contrived. And with a doppelganger, it'd be even better. Oh, I need to sleep and come back and all this other stuff.
Jared even says you could TPK some favorite NPCs and replace them with doppelgangers. Yeah, you could absolutely do that. And the PC who's rubbing their hands together like, oh, I get to play a doppelganger and attack the group. you could actually play one in a group without disrupting it, because maybe the adventuring group is you're harnessing them to defend you when you're committing other crimes elsewhere, right? So you don't want to backstab your own adventuring party. What you want is you want them to be on your side, playing the good guy, always helping them out, always doing things in the background, always being on their side. And then when you come into town and you become the serial killer of sorts, the spy, the assassin, when people come hunting after you, you're like, I'm just innocent. All the other player characters are like, yeah, they're innocent. Get away from them. Yeah, you could get away with it for quite a while if you play your cards right. Yeah, you have to be careful because it's so easy to get into the hole. He's acting completely different. Like you said, if the player was a GM and they do it subtly, yeah, you could play this for a long campaign. Even.
Just those little nuances, right? It's all about contigual nuance. Maybe they stay. Every time a fight breaks out, they step a few feet. They keep their distance. It makes sense to keep their distance, but then throughout the campaign or throughout the game, they keep their distance, but they always seem to be, I hold my action. Oh no, I don't do that. What were you waiting for? Oh, he's waiting to do the right spell to get our backs and help us. But, when that net is thrown and everybody's snared in, it's the reflection on your actions that weren't necessarily questionable, but all make sense now. Like any writing tool, anytime you're watching something or you're reading something where there is a traitor in the midst that gets revealed later on in the book, if the writer didn't do it well, you're like, oh, they're just doing this for drama, these sons of bitches, right? But if the writer did their job, you're like, oh yeah, that's right. Oh, remember the time when, XYZ? As a player, you've got to be that writer, helping to write the GM story with them, making sure that when the players get hit because of your actions, they can reflect on, oh yeah, that's right, you son of a, I knew it. And they're talking their crap, but they're saying I knew it because now they can realize everything that happened.
Yep. All right. Unfortunately, we could go on forever with this. We go down some other tangents. Maybe we could revisit it. Tips and Tricks Tuesdays tomorrow. Maybe we could use some of these things in tips and tricks. That might be an idea on how to incorporate like how to properly backstab a group, if that makes sense, or infiltrate or something. You know what I mean? The good, and of course, there's always the idea of like, can you play an evil campaign? That's always a big thing. Like, or the best and worst ways to do so. That kind of thing. So that might be a really good idea to do for tomorrow, and bring up the idea of like the doppelganger and like the player character who's working against the group and no one knows it. Although I will say Vincent makes a point, like maybe there's a group of doppelgangers who support adventurers by replacing fallen group members, and it made me think of a comedy of errors where each player starts getting taken out, replaced by a doppelganger, but all the other members don't know, including from each other, or each member knows there's only one other doppelganger, even though there's like 6 adventurers, but they all know a different secret, and they're all pretending to be someone else. That just be bizarre. Like, he's a spy, and everyone's pointing like, no, he's a spy. You're a spy. No, I'm not a spy. You're a spy. And then they're like, I think we all are. but
yes, I am a spy, but you knew that. That's why you got me to join the group. I'm not that kind of spy. I'm your spy.
Yeah. But anyway, I'm going to end it here. I'm going to let Infinite take out the very end. So I'm going to say I'm DBJ, DeVabrian Jackson. I'm RPG with DBJ. Just check everything on the channel. All the crap in the doobly-doo. I'll add some more little details in there. I come at you Monday through Friday on my demi-daily deep dives, 6 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. So if you've caught me live, this is the time that I do it all the time. If you haven't caught me live, you're probably asleep when you should be. But anyway, Infinite, please take us out, plug your channel, and I think you're down in doobly-doo as well.
Yeah, my name is Nelson. You can find me on almost everywhere: Facebook, Twitter, Twitch, as Infinite Roleplay. I draw, I do art, I design games, and if you want to find some more of my artwork, you can actually find me on DeviantArt. as freelance digital. I've got a few different art styles there. You can always see come to my YouTube for really, really weird reimaginings of traditional ideas. And we'll leave it at that.
Perfect. And as always, you catch us. Yeah, Nelson's a co-host, just as RP Gamer, Darius Jana, a bunch of other people. Hopefully, we'll end up making this more of like a giant size creators conclave or something like that. But whatever the case may be, thanks guys for joining in, and I'll see you tomorrow.
Peace.